The Rewind Kid is here, and the Clash legacy has arrived for another night. But by the end of the 90 minutes, the Quakes got burned with another draw at home, this time 2-2 with FC Dallas. Having equalized late in the game does paint the picture with some element of triumph, but having been against such a weak opponent and being yet another draw, fans are probably right to feel like this result was not enough. My name's Kevin, I'm joined by Luis, and together we're the Quakesaholics, and let's get into this match. Luis, what are your first impressions on this result?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that I, as a fan, definitely was pretty disappointed with the result. I thought it was a pretty scrappy game, but one that we needed to get more out of, especially considering we're gonna go on the road after this.
Taking it from the top like we usually do, starting 11, there were some notable changes here. I think the biggest one was that DeJuan Jones was not available, and then on top of that, Benji Kikinovic was also unavailable with the injury that he picked up last week. And how we saw Nick Lima play in that Minnesota game, I'm not surprised that Bruce did not want to try out that experiment again at right wing back. So we see the Quakes revert back to the 3-5-2 or 5-3-2, just depending on whether they're in possession or not. And that does bring Espinosa back to the right wing back position. And then through that, we see the return of the trio midfield, and that gives way to Nico finally coming back after a long time being injured. And then the two strikers up top, of course, Josef Martinez, Chicho Rango. The only other change was Reed Roberts at left center back, I should say. And I'm not surprised by that. Romney looked like he was really struggling against Minnesota, and also with how many minutes he's had. It could be a combination of both things. But generally, this seemed like the sensible move to make. What did you think of the lineup?
Yeah, I thought it made sense. I thought it was good, to see Nico back in the starting 11. And yeah, given the injuries that we've had, like DeJuan Jones, I think it made sense. Reed Roberts looked good. Yeah, I was content with it.
Overall, it seemed like it was working out for the majority of the game, but on the topic of injuries, we did see another injury come up for the Quakes. This time, Vitor Costa goes out around the 30th minute, which is, I don't know, I'm superstitious with these kinds of things, and that was more or less the same minute that Benji came out. Seeing it in game, it looked pretty bad, especially with like body language and reactions. It definitely seemed like maybe it was a knee injury of some sorts, maybe an ankle. I watched it back though, and it seemed like it was sort of like Espinosa, where it was just like a gash or a cut, but just very deep. Also, the players' body languages, although they were alarmed, it didn't seem like it was, any kind of bone injury. So I'm hopeful. I'm hoping for the best, hoping that Vitor Costa can come back, because that's really going to play into effect of how this team plays going forwards. But yeah, we saw Romney come in. Roberts gets pushed to the side. It didn't seem like Roberts had that natural inclination to go up top and send in crosses. We haven't seen him play wing back. I don't know if he's played that position before being at the Quakes. I was surprised that Ricketts didn't come in. But what did you think of those changes and how that kind of played out?
Yeah, it was concerning to see Vitor Costa come down, especially, given that Benji Kikinovic was just injured, DeJuan Jones was unable to make this game. Scary sight. I remember him getting hurt, trying to stand back up and just not being able to. So obviously the stretcher had to come in, and we'll see what the prognosis is for him. But we ended up with no fullbacks, no natural fullbacks on the field, with Romney coming in. I thought Reed Roberts was okay. I think that, of course, he isn't going to give you the same sort of width and isn't going to give the same runs as Victor Costa would, or just a natural fullback. But I think defensively as well, he did a good job. I thought that it was fine given the circumstances.
Defensive solidity is definitely something that this team seems to be lacking, especially in these last, 3-4 games. I did want to spend some time to go through some of these goals. We saw the first one. My impression of the goal was that someone made a really bad giveaway, but I don't remember, or at least in the moment, I didn't remember who it was. So I watched the tape back, and I was astonished that Chicho had given up 3 consecutive balls to Dallas in the midfield in like the span of 60 to 90 seconds. Luckily, those didn't turn into anything. The Quakes were able to go on an attack. He gets the ball for a 4th time, sends it deep to kind of that right wing position of the field. But then the ball somehow ends up back to him, and then he loses the ball, and then immediately Dallas hit us on the counter. And then from there was a lot of other defensive failures, but the thing that jumped out to me the most is that our center backs were pushed up so high on the field. And this is something we've talked a lot about, honestly, at this point. And this is the exact moment, the exact nightmare that Quakes fans have now, is we start building up the attack, we lose the ball, and then our center backs are basically like at the halfway point in the field. And it didn't help that Nico was playing as, I guess, in terms of responsibility in that moment, as a center back. And it's his first game back in a long time, so I don't necessarily fault him for this. He's not playing a natural position. But the offside trap we see it fail again. And you see Rodriguez kind of stepping back and forth, like shuffling his feet, checking his shoulder, not really knowing what to do, and then ultimately just gets burned because Nico is enabling that onside position. And then from there, we're all just chasing the ball down the field. It hits the post, luckily, but then eventually goes in. Maybe Daniel could have done more. I think Nico has some responsibility. Rodriguez being pushed up so high. Overall, just center backs being so high up the field. At that point, it's like, okay, where's Wilson? Where's Roberts? Where's Romney at that point, right? So it just, again, the center backs are so high up the field.
Ever since that Charlotte game, right, we saw how bad it can be at times if we get caught out, if the rest defense, or how the defenders are when we are in possession of the ball, if they're not in the right place, if the other team is good on transitions, it can definitely be very dangerous. We would have more solidity if we put that back line further back, of course, but obviously I think the trade-off is you have a higher press. If the back line keeps its line up high, it can compress the other team, and it allows for our forwards and maybe our midfielders to put pressure on their center backs and their midfielders. And I do think that sometimes can lead to scrappiness. And if, again, in moments like that where there's too much chaos and the other team just sends a good ball, or there's just a moment of lapse of concentration, you get burned. And it was a really ugly goal, honestly, seeing that. The trade-off is we press higher. Maybe that's a reason why we can score more goals. So that's the argument, right? How much of a risk do you want to take? And I think it is true. We've seen time and time again that risk not paying off in the way we want to.
And I get that. It's a trade-off to score a lot of goals, but the problem is that when we're conceding this many goals, 6 goals in 2 games, that is a lot of goals. And just generally speaking, we've been conceding a lot of goals. So that argument, I think, only holds up if we can consistently score, 3-4 goals a game. And I just don't think we're at that point. And yes, we have a lot of buildup, we have a lot of moments, but the team at times just isn't clinical enough. In this game alone, we saw Josef Martinez. Luckily he got the goal at the end to equalize and get that point for us, but he also did have an opportunity where it was almost one-on-one with the keeper, and it went straight into the keeper's hands, right? So there's a lot of moments like that where it's just, that argument only holds up if we can score enough goals to get the 3 points.
Right. I will say, however, that I think also the opposition, the context of the game too, if you're up against a team where maybe, let's just say on paper, there's a bit of a mismatch, in those moments, sometimes you might benefit from the chaos a bit more, because if you go kind of head to head, kind of both cautious, it's like, maybe 7 times out of 10, if you're playing against like an LAFC or an Inter Miami or something like that, they're going to have the upper hand on you. But if you kind of can turn it into a more chaotic game, that chaos kind of goes in your favor. But again, yeah, like, I also think that's important, when you consider a FC Dallas at home, you don't need to be as risky because we just fundamentally, the players on the field, the offensive players on the field are good enough, or at least should be good enough to create chances. And it's unfortunate that it's the risk and it leads to something like this where you're creating the chaos, and now the chaos actually worked in favor of FC Dallas.
And it's not just these moments that I'm criticizing the defense. We saw in the second goal a completely different situation where the team is well positioned. We are in our box. Almost everyone is paired up man to man. Everything seems to be in control. But then there's one person that kind of messes the whole thing up. And in this case, it was Rodriguez, again, being somewhat involved. You can see him be, 2-3 yards in front of Dallas's left wing. And Rodriguez isn't checking his shoulder. He's not scanning. Throughout the whole play that ball is coming into the box, he's not seeing where his man is running into. So that player runs straight behind him, straight at goal, completely uncontested when he receives the ball and scores a really easy goal. And I'm not saying that everyone has to be paired up. I'm not saying do man-to-man marking. I understand why there's zonal marking. But I think there's 2 ways of doing it. And you can see Harks on that same play. He is checking his shoulder multiple times. He is at least running in the direction of the runner. He's kind of seeing, okay, where are the gaps that I need to fill in? And he's filling those gaps. But then when you have Rodriguez just kind of standing around idly, I just feel like you're asking to be scored on. I think on this goal, Rodriguez looks really bad. And with like combining both of these goals where he is directly being involved, and then on top of last week's game where we concede 4 goals and he's also involved in some of those, I think it's time to start thinking about Floriani being given another chance, honestly.
Yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from, but as well, I do think, you know, especially at this point in the game, we had subbed off Olaru, we had subbed off Nico, and we were putting in a lot of forwards. I think as a result of that, you're asking a lot more from your center backs to do build up play. And that being said, Rodriguez is good on the ball, and he does offer you a lot on the ball that I don't think personally we've seen Floriani be able to offer so far. Another thing too is I also do kind of think I agree with you. On the face of it, the marking is just not good enough. I think in a situation like that, it does come to determination a little bit. And I think the player who scored for that second goal for Dallas looked like he just wanted to get on the end of that cross more than Rodriguez, honestly. That being said, I do think that that goal does somewhat come as a result of the state of the game. We were trying to go for that winning goal. And by that point, yeah, we had Skahan running to the byline to try to mark, to try to, you know, snuff out that cross. And of course, that's not ideal. So I do think that that is part of it. And it is, you know, blame on Rodriguez again, but it is a cross right down the top of the penalty, right down the 6 yard box, and those are always going to be dangerous. And there is also an element of responsibility that goes into not allowing that cross to happen. There's a 1-2 on the top of the box that happens that allows that cross to get through. But so I also think that you have to consider the state of the game as well.
Oh, for sure. And I think it's really easy to, sit in our seats and watch these replays and be like, oh, you did this and this wrong. But to be in those dangerous moments and to not even be scanning, I think is what I fault the most. Because sure, the ball can come across and you can get beaten. It happens. It happens in every game. It's just part of how this game is played. And we benefit from that too when we, send those crosses from Espinosa. We've seen it time and time again. But again, you have to be scanning. Towards wrapping up on a positive, the Quakes do score a lot of goals. Not in this game, but generally speaking, we do. And something that is notable is that Chicho is already at double-digit goals with 10. And then Josef, after this game, has reached 9. So we can be safe to assume that Josef should be getting that 10th goal should he stay healthy. Why is this at all significant? Because it has not been the case for a long time that the Quakes have 2 strikers that both have double-digit goals. Last year, no one had double-digit goals at all. I think the leader was Pellegrino with 7, and then Espinosa was behind with like 5 or 6. And the last time we had 2 players with double-digit goals was in 2023, but that was 1 striker and 1 winger. So double striker has not happened since 2018, which is a weird year to think about because we didn't make playoffs and we got the spoon, and that was up until last year anyways, our worst year in basically club history. And so, yeah, we had a lot of goals that year, but also 71 goals conceded. Something to think about. I thought it was an interesting stat, so that's the positive for this one, that we have lots of goal scorers.
Yeah, one thing is you cannot knock the Quakes for being exciting. That's one thing that you cannot take away from us, especially this season. And it has been a goal fest most of the time.
And hopefully we can continue that goal fest this weekend against Seattle Sounders. This will be the second leg of the Heritage Cup. Seattle Sounders are a much better team than Dallas. I think Dallas was like 3rd to the bottom going into our game, and I think Seattle are somewhere in like 4th, 5th in the West. Definitely will be a lot more challenging, especially with how we have to manage these injuries. Hopefully we get good news about Costa that it isn't a long-term injury. But yeah, that's all we had for this game. If you have any other thoughts, definitely let us know, and we'll catch you after the Seattle game. Thanks.